Welcome to Agape Night. How many of y'all enjoy these nights? Wow, it is dead today. It is dead. All right,
okay.
so
okay.
no interactions
They'll get
today.
hyped after the talk.
Just gonna move on like nothing happened there. Welcome to Agape Night. This is the place where we talk about all things love, relationships, and love, really. Agape, Greek word for love. And if it is your first time here, welcome. We're glad that you somehow found yourself here. Today's topic is a really interesting one.
Wait, first, who are you?
Oh yeah, who am I? I'm Ruben.
I'm Dora.
And we are your, people that will talk about said topic today.
We are somewhat qualified.
Not really. I don't know if we are qualified.
I said somewhat.
Somewhat. No, maybe we're somewhat qualified. But anyhow, today we have. It's a wild topic because I think every single one of us have either found ourselves in this situation before or will find ourselves in this type of situation.
Hopefully not.
Yeah, I mean, you can never, you can't control other people who give this to you. But today we're talking about ultimatums. And so today's topic is called The Ultimatum. Here's a quick question. How many of y'all have watched the Netflix show The Ultimatum? Oh wow, okay, so quite a number of y'all. I have also watched that show, and for research purposes, of course. And wow, and let me tell you, if Toxic, needed like some sort of image next to it, it'd probably be The Ultimatum, because like I remember hearing the premise of the show by Nick Lachey, I think it was, who was like kind of sharing what this show was about. And I remember going, yeah, this is wild. This cannot end well. And so this topic came up actually in the...
Wait, what's the premise? Because I haven't watched it.
The premise, okay, fair. The premise is that there's a couple, and there's one individual who's like giving the other individual an ultimatum of like, you either like, marry me or like, get out of here. And oftentimes it's really toxic because the other person's like, but we've been dating for like 5 years. Isn't that okay? And like, and it's very like oftentimes one-sided. And when you watch the show, you see in some cases, very few cases, does it actually draw the couple back together? But oftentimes it actually leads to separation and sucks. But yeah. But the topic came up because you guys were actually doing something.
Yeah, so at Zoe Church, we have like prayer nights and prayer groups. And so our prayer group was actually chatting about various Netflix shows like Love is Blind and The Ultimatum. And that just kind of stirred up a thought in my mind of, what do you do when you face an ultimatum? What is an ultimatum? And not just ultimatums, but ultimatums, threats, and other control issues, because that's what it really comes down to, is issues of control and power struggles, and how do you handle those things in relationships? Yeah,
and it's just so interesting because like in the world, there's a show like that obviously has the funding to run because in the world it kind of seems like that's a normal thing. Like ultimatums are, that's kind of like okay, I guess, but like to me, when I'm thinking about it, it's like it doesn't make sense, even just from a logical standpoint. Like, how are you supposed to build on something healthy from that? And I think for us, wherever you kind of find yourself, whether you're like in a relationship, whether you're, dating, married, single, ultimatums are one of those things that, like you were saying, it comes from a place of trying to control a situation. And I found myself in those situations in the past where, you're given an ultimatum, you're kind of pushed, your back sort of against the wall, having to make some sort of decision from this place of like fear almost, and this other person's like, putting their, pressure on you. Yeah. And so that's the reason why we want to talk about it, because in relationships, if you've not experienced it, it happens because we're just, we're broken and fallen people. And so it often gets to this place where when we are scared of the unknown, when we get to a place where we are like just filled with anxiety and fear, oftentimes we do run to an ultimatum. We go, if you don't, then I will. Or we give a threat to try and control the situation.
So I tried to look up a definition of like what an ultimatum is. And to be honest, when you look at the definition, it doesn't actually sound as bad as it is, because it comes off as, well, this is something where you're posing a decision to be made, and it's usually as a last resort out of like frustration or desperation. And while I can see why that would be true, ultimatums and threats and all of these power struggles, ultimately, like they do four things in a relationship. First of all, they manipulate, and they're used to manipulate. And, you know, when we talk, we come from a place of talking from a heart as Christians and believers in Jesus. And so that was never Jesus' heart. He never manipulated people into a decision that they had to make, into believing in him, into following him. He was very honest, and he communicated honestly. So first of all, they're manipulative. Second of all, they hinder honesty and communication. So if you are trying to build a relationship based on honesty, it's actually going to do the opposite. So the second you start putting ultimatums and threats and those power struggles in your relationship, you're actually going to limit the amount of honesty and trust that you can have there, which is the third thing it does. It breaks trust. So it's not easy for you to trust someone when you're like, okay, first of all, I'm being forced into something that I don't want to do.
Yeah.
Or if you're on the opposite end, somebody is doing something, but you're like, are they doing it because they really want to, or because I force them to?
Yeah.
So they don't really, lead to the result that you want ultimately. And finally, it creates a place of fear and anxiety, because people walk into these types of situations with fear of, first of all, could it happen again? Am I going to is this person going to leave me if I don't act in this way, or if I don't do this? And so because of that, it often leads to a place where your relationship is running based on fear and anxiety rather than based on love.
Yeah. If we were, as Christians, we have this, perspective. And so, just kind of take that as you will. But for us, when we see this happen in relationships, we kind of understand, because we're sinful, we're broken people, and almost like our fleshly side takes over in those moments when we want to control a situation. We might not necessarily even want to control our partner, but it's like we're just scared of what the outcome might be, and we don't like that it's not something that we agree with or want in our lives. And so we often then, as like a last resort, run to this. And the worst part is, it's like a drug also. It's like the moment you use it once and you get your way, it's addictive. It's quicker to come the next time to go, well, now I know I got what I wanted when I gave them an ultimatum last time. And so now you create this pattern in your relationship. And it really is an unhealthy pattern. In the scriptures, this is something really powerful. 2 Timothy chapter 3, verse 1 to 5. Aaron will probably pull it up. 2 Timothy chapter 3, verse 1 to 5. This is what it says. But understand this, that in the last days there will come times of difficulty, for people will be lovers of self, lovers of money, proud, arrogant, abusive, disobedient to their parents, ungrateful, unholy, heartless, unappeasable, slanderous, without self-control, brutal, not loving good, treacherous, reckless, swollen. He just goes on and on and on. Really awful list. And he says in verse 5, avoid such people. If we're honest with ourselves, we have this tendency to kind of lean this way, right? If we're honest with ourselves, oftentimes what leads us to doing these kinds of things is our selfishness. It's our love of self, our desire to preserve ourself. It doesn't come from this like selfless love that we see Jesus sharing and calling us out to exemplify in our own lives. And so that's why one of the things we want to talk about is how to then deal with this, if this is something that you're already struggling with in your relationship. Or if you're not, hey, we're building some good foundations so you don't do this when you do get into a relationship.
So one of the things that I think is important to identify is, why do people use these types of tactics? So the first thought that comes to mind is obviously people want control. They want control of the outcome, and it's usually for two reasons. Either they're scared or anxious of the outcome, like you said, or they're selfish. They want their way, and they want to make sure that they have their way so that they can enjoy the outcome that they wanted. But there are other reasons as well. One of the reasons that comes to mind actually is people have unmet needs and desires. Yeah. So sometimes when we're in a relationship, we do have needs that need to be met, whether that's like emotionally and communication. Maybe it's like, you know, on a physical level, I need certain things done. I need safety. I need shelter. We have a regular, you know, a standard of needs that we need met. And when those needs are not being met, which, you know, quite often can be the case because people are human and we make mistakes and we're not always perfect. We can't always live up to those standards. Then sometimes that can lead to those ultimatums being posed. Another example is also desperation and frustration. So if you were in a situation where you're like, I am so desperate because I've been waiting, I've been trying, I've been doing the same things over and over again, and it's not working, then that can often lead to those same like ultimatums and threats. I remember actually like early on in our marriage, we were dealing with, you know, a lot of moving parts, figuring out how like to live together, figuring out what it meant to be married, figuring out like, you know, different like jobs and different things that were brand new as well, a new home. And we found out early on that I was pregnant, and right away it was like the pregnancy hormones were a factor. And there was, you know, there's a lot going on during that season. And I remember we had this one particular issue that like we were just butting heads on and we could not get past. And it got to the point where I was just like I'm not budging off of this point. I'm like, it's my way or the highway. And I very clearly posed it to Ruben. I'm just like, either we do this or I'm gone. And we went back and forth a lot. Ruben was very much like, I'm not dealing with an ultimatum. Like, no, you can't give me an ultimatum. And I was like, okay, then bye. And that's where a lot of, like, you guys have heard the stories of how during our first year, we were very close to divorcing because I had a very, like, unhealthy mindset about, like, if this is not going to be done my way, then I'm just going to leave. I can just go because it's, you know, I'm just not going to be happy. I'm not going to, you know, it's not going to work for us. We're going to keep fighting, and I'm not okay with that. And so we had to work through what that looked like. And, you know, thank God we did, and thank God we're here now. But Amen. It was honestly like one of those big challenges that we can go back and go, like, that was a pivotal moment that shaped our relationship a lot. And it could have, thankfully you didn't like give in the ultimatum. You also like had the perspective of like, how do we maneuver this? How do we get help so that we can work through it? But it could have very much like broken us apart if you had either given in or if you had said no and I just left.
Yeah. Oh, I'm glad you shared that example because I wasn't going to bring that one up. But yeah, that was a fun one. You know, as we're talking, if there are questions that come up, feel free to write them down because we actually do live Q&A post. So just in case you're like, ooh, I have a question, feel free to write it down, and you can send it in as soon as we're done.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
What do you do if you recognize, or if you know, let's say you're in a relationship and you've already kind of fallen into some of these patterns and some of these like bad habits?
Yeah, well, the first thing I feel like you have to do is first be able to recognize it. So if you're like at the spot where you recognize, okay, I have been operating with ultimatums in my relationship. First thing, I'll just be honest, and this is the hard one. It's a hard one. You've got to stop. You got to stop. And then the next time your partner, your spouse, your girlfriend, your boyfriend, whoever is like trying to do something and you don't like it and you want to get your way, first thing you just got to go, nope, I need to change something about this. So recognizing it is huge.
And also, like, if you notice this, if you're like, I'm in a relationship and this is happening on the other end, like my partner keeps doing this, like, call it out. Yeah. Just be honest and straight and call it out. We talk a lot about being open and honest and bringing things to the table, because if things just go mentioned, then that's how resentment builds up, and that's how like animosity and anger and frustration builds up. So you want to call it out, but do it in a gracious and loving way. Don't just be like, hey, you're always giving me ultimatums and that sucks. Like, I hate it. Just have a conversation, be loving, be gracious. Scripture tells us to rebuke with grace and with love. And so do that. Have a conversation where you talk to the person lovingly and you just say, I've noticed that this is a pattern that keeps coming up. You do it in a time where things are calm and no one is heated or frustrated. I've noticed that this is something that happens. I notice this is a pattern that keeps coming up in our relationship, and this is why I don't think it's good. And if your partner is here, you guys have this common foundation that you can hold each other accountable to.
Yeah. We've talked about this in the past, one of our previous Agape nights, about like having clarifying conversations. And so choose to have one of those like clarifying conversations where you are choosing to address something important, but doing it in a healthy manner. So definitely important to do it that way. But something that you gotta dig deeper and find out why someone is giving an ultimatum. Because just simply saying no and moving on from there is like pulling out weeds from the top of the grass. You're not really dealing with the actual issue beneath the surface. What you have to do is when someone's knee-jerk reaction is just to run to an ultimatum, pause and honestly start asking some questions like why? Why is it that you feel currently fearful or anxious, like you're running to an ultimatum?
I mean, even in terms of, like, if you're doing this yourself, identify your why. Identify the reason that you are following those patterns. Dig a little deeper and start thinking, like, what is it about this situation that is causing me to jump to such a drastic response? Yeah. So maybe that is, I'm afraid of, like the result if they did this instead. Or maybe it's, I really want this because I really like this thing, or I really want this thing, and so if I don't get it, I'm going to be upset for whatever reason. Maybe it's I have like previous trauma or baggage surrounding this specific area. So really identifying your why is important. So a lot of self-reflection is key here. And if you're not good at self-reflection, then go to someone you trust and share it with them and be like, this is what's going on. This is what I want. This is what I'm feeling. And have them speak in, because sometimes you can identify things in your life that you might not be able to. So go to a good friend, especially someone who is a Christian who can give you wise counsel. Go to pastors or mentors in your life and share with them. This is what I'm going through. This is what I want. I don't know why it's causing me to feel so heightened and desire it so deeply, but I'm struggling and I don't know where it's coming from.
Yeah. And one of the things that you can actually help yourself by is working on your anxiety and learning how to deal with your anxiety in a healthier way. Because oftentimes what's happening is our anxiety and our fears are getting the best of us. And so some of those healthy patterns, healthy structures, whether it's you journal, whether it's you do something artistic, whether it's you go for a walk, learning to kind of de-stress and decompress in moments when you're kind of hitting a pinnacle, going, no, I need to pause here, because anything that I'm going to say now is actually going to be very unhealthy.
Yeah, find your coping mechanisms, whatever that could be, whether you need to do breathing exercises, find things that can calm down the physical symptoms in the moment so that you can address like the emotional and spiritual aspects too. Because honestly, like the best thing for you to do is to run to God with this and be like, just pray and ask him to also give you insight and give you wisdom and give you clarity on what's going on. Because a lot of the times when we look at our anxiety, the reason for us being anxious is twofold. It's a lack of trust. It's not trusting in God to give you the outcome that you desire or to give you what you think is good, or it's not trusting your partner to do the thing that you desire or to love you in the way that you want to be loved. Yeah. So dealing with your anxiety by recognizing also some of the trust issues you might have and working on that, because I think a lot of the times when we look at, our lack of trust in someone, it's often not founded in that person. I mean, sometimes it is. I'm not saying that it's never founded in that person, but like in our relationship, for example, I really struggled to trust Ruben early on, and I realized that he had actually done nothing to make me not trust him. He had only ever proven himself to be trustworthy. I had trust issues in other areas of my life, with other relationships in my life, that caused me to then impose those things on him. And when I started recognizing, I'm like, okay, he actually has done nothing wrong. He has only proven himself to be trustworthy. And I started thinking more positively about him and about the outcome based on my trust for him. It very much changed how I trusted him and how our relationship looked.
Yeah. And one of the things I think will help is the basic of just learning how to communicate. You'll be surprised at how much of your problems and your issues are really just needing to better your communication skills. When I first entered into our relationship, my communication skills were way down. Like, I didn't grow up in a context where we communicated in a healthy way. And so for me, I kind of learned that over time. And so it was almost like trial by fire a little bit, where I kind of was thrown into it and I was learning on the fly. But the positive is it's possible.
Yeah, I mean, I also came from a context where communication was very, it wasn't done well, and conflict was not done well. And I had a parent who was explosive and a parent who shut down. And it led to me going, either if I'm angry, I'm going to like lose it, or if I'm hurt, I'm going to like just be silent and not talk about it. Yeah. And so a lot of us come from backgrounds where like communication is, we think we can communicate because we talk a lot, but that doesn't mean we can actually communicate, because it's not about saying a lot, it's about what you're saying. So communicating in healthy patterns, I think you talked earlier about clarifying conversations. One of the things that we recommend is often asking a question. Like, ask a question to clarify what this person's intention was, what's going on, and like if they actually intended the things that they intended, but also being able to listen and receive. And actually, we talk about this a lot in couples counseling about active listening. When somebody says something to you, can you repeat it? Can you say it back in different words and give the same meaning? Because if you can, then that means you're actually actively listening. A lot of the times we don't listen. We are sitting there quietly thinking of our next point and what we want to say next, rather than actually listening.
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead.
What do you do, or how do you disarm if you are faced with an ultimatum?
I'm going to say this. It's going to sound out of pocket, but just trust me. Don't negotiate with terrorists. What I mean by that is, that's funny. What I mean by that is, in those situations, the moment you start entertaining an idea of like, yeah, I'm going to give in to the ultimatum, I'm going to kind of like bend to it, you are now creating an unhealthy pattern that you can bet your bottom dollar will be repeated. Yeah,
you're reinforcing it.
Yeah.
As adults, we're still like children. If you reinforce a bad habit, we will learn from it and we will continue to do it.
Yeah. And so there are so many other things you can do before, bending and just going, all right, I'm going to bend the knee and I guess just, take this ultimatum. It's going to be uncomfortable. I'm not saying any of it is easy, but all of the things that are not easy, they're actually oftentimes they're the healthiest things for you. Like, one example is when you find yourself in the middle of a heated fight and someone gives an ultimatum and you try to call that out. You try to go, hey, like, that's not a healthy way to build a relationship. You are forcing me and demanding me, to do something, and that's not okay. And you're threatening me that something will happen if I don't do that. That's not like a healthy way to build a relationship. And the other person goes, nope, too bad. I'm going to have it my way. One of the most uncomfortable things you can probably do, and I don't know where you are currently, but lots of people struggle to share this with other people. Lots of people struggle to even come to Dora and I as pastors, or to your own pastors, to share some of those things that you struggle with. There's a lot of shame and guilt around, oh, we're struggling with this thing. which is why Dora and I openly talk about our issues to try and dispel that a little bit, because there shouldn't be shame and guilt. There should be vulnerability and a willingness to go, we're broken people, but we're working on it, and we're going to get better. And so one of the easiest things, not the easiest, hardest things, but it is one of the most simplest, in that all you need to do is pick up your phone and go, hey, I need to talk to my pastor. I need your counsel. Can we go as a couple and, get, counseled so that we can work through this issue? Oftentimes, that's actually something that will help you in those moments.
Something that's like really obvious, but I feel a lot of people don't do it, is ask God for wisdom.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times we get so caught up in the moment that we just speak before we pray, and we say, hey, God, what do you want me to do here in this situation? I remember, again, early on in our marriage, I started to learn that because I was very responsive. So Ruben would say something, I'm like, but you said this and you said that, and I would just respond and lash out. And that was how fights would go from like maybe a 10-minute disagreement to like a 10-hour fight. And
that's not an exaggeration, by the way. Just being very real with you guys.
And so I learned to just stop, pause, and sometimes I wasn't even listening to what he was saying in the moment, because I would have to calm myself down, and I would have to just pray and say, God, like, give me grace, give me wisdom, allow me to handle this the way that you would want me to handle this. Allow me to love Ruben like you would want me to love Ruben. Yeah. And so it's a challenge, because it is also putting your pride aside and going, I'm not going to go after my pound of flesh. I'm not going to get what I want here. But it's something that's really important. James chapter 1, verse 5 says, if any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives generously to all without reproach, and it will be given him. So if you feel like you want God to give you wisdom in this situation, he will. He's willing to grant it, but we often don't ask.
Yeah. Two other passages of scripture that kind of comes to mind that I think really should shape whether we're on the receiving end of an ultimatum or we're the ones who are actually giving one and catch ourselves giving one. The first one, that's I think a little bit obvious, 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 4 to 8. Love is patient and kind. Love does not envy or boast. It is not arrogant or rude. This one, hard. It does not insist on its own way. That one. We know love is patient. We know love is kind. Does not insist on its own way in relationships. Ooh, that's hard. But if that's truly the love of Jesus, and that's truly what we're trying to live out in our own lives as Christians, how much more then to the person that we say that we love? How much more than to the person that we're supposed to be, thinking about more than ourselves? And so that's one. And then there's another one that really stood out to me. 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 24 to 27. Paul's writing this, and so just follow me here. He goes, do you not know that in a race all the runners run, but only one receives the prize? Now, in their day, there were many games that would go on, specifically like the Olympics, but also in Corinth, they had their own like mini version of like the Olympics. And so to the people that Paul was writing to, they knew this lingo, like they understood. And he goes, every athlete exercises self-control in all things. They do it to receive a perishable wreath, but we an imperishable. So I do not run aimlessly. I do not box as one beating the air, but I discipline my body and keep it under control, lest after preaching to others, I myself should be disqualified. I think it's one of the greatest ways that we can actually show the person of Jesus is how we choose to treat the other person that we are connected to, our partners. When we choose to put them first, when we choose to truly lay our lives down like Christ did for the church, when we choose to love in that way, this unconditional love that does not insist on its own way, that's when actually something starts to shift in our relationships. That's when it starts becoming That's when it goes from a relationship like any other relationship that you'll find out there in the world to a Christ-centered relationship. And that's when things change, when you're like, I'm pursuing this prize and I'm running the race well and I'm gonna, finish well. And it's gonna be not because of me, but it's gonna be because I wanna care for this other person that I'm entrusted to care for, this person that I claim to love. And so I think it's such a good reminder for us to go, well, I need to care about and exercise self-control in everything that I'm choosing to do.
Yeah, for sure. So, continuing on, if we talk about what do you do if you're posed with that ultimatum, I think you want to identify what the reasoning behind the ultimatum is, what the need is that this person has. So, when somebody poses an ultimatum to you, like, either you propose by Christmas or I'm gone. Well, the request itself is not necessarily done in a healthy way, but you can identify what is the need. The need is they want commitment. They want security. So you can identify the need behind the request, behind the ultimatum, and then you actually can affirm that need.
Yeah.
One of the things that you can do is actually tell the person, like, I recognize that your need for this is what's causing you to react the way that you are.
Yeah.
I understand that this is something that you desire, and it's valid. It's a valid desire. It's something that you want for a good reason. And then you can respond to the need without responding to the ultimatum. So at this point, now you're actually making a choice. You're going to either like agree to do the thing that they want, but you let them know that, like, I agree that, like, we should get married. I agree that this is something that should come down the line very soon, but I'm not doing it by the timeline that you want. I'm not doing it because you posed this ultimatum. I'm doing it because I recognize you're in need and I love you and I care for you, and that's why I'm going to do this in this way.
Yeah, that's really good.
You could also disagree and say, well, I don't want to do this. And I think assess again why you don't want to do it, because if it's something that is healthy for you to do and it's something that will make your partner happy or your partner needs because of like their love language or whatever it is that the situation is, maybe you need to assess where you're falling short.
Like in that same example, it would look like one person's going, hey, propose to me by December. The other person's going, I understand your desire and need for commitment, but my struggle is that we haven't worked through some big issues that we still have. And there you're also assessing, but also sharing what's going on the inside. And that way it becomes a topic to actually work through and talk about and hopefully deal with.
Yeah.
Work through.
And then finally, you can compromise, right? And so that could look like, okay, well, let's work through, maybe in this situation, let's go to counseling. Let's work through like counseling with our pastors or with a counselor or with whatever, and let's see how that goes. And then if we're able to get through that and we're able to do well, then we can talk about taking that next step. So there are some options that you can take, but in every case, I would say do it in a sense of I'm responding to the need. I'm not responding to the ultimatum, because again, we don't want to reinforce that. So when we call out that ultimatum in the first place, and then we say, I'm not doing this because of the ultimatum, I'm doing these things because I think it's important for us to have a good foundation of love, and that's how I'm going to love you, I think that's super healthy.
Yeah.
But then also communicate your decision and communicate your reasons and be clear about them. Don't just decide, well, no, I'm not proposing by Christmas, but I'm not going to tell her that I'm not proposing by Christmas, and she's just going to find that out, and then at Christmas, we're going to have a big issue. No, have a conversation about it, communicate the reason, be very clear so that you're on the same page. Again, It goes back to that healthy communication.
Yeah. What are some other things that you can do to just kind of help avoid ultimatums?
Well, I think an important one that we talk about a lot is setting healthy expectations and boundaries.
Yeah.
So when we set healthy expectations and boundaries, we're automatically setting ourselves up for better success because people know what's coming down the pipeline, right?
Yeah. We always talk about healthy expectations. They should be communicated, They should be realistic, they should be conscious, and they should be agreed upon. So agreed upon, meaning they've been communicated and you both agree. You can't just be like, these are my expectations, now take it and go and deal with it. No, you got to agree upon it. Communicated, like you said earlier, you can't just have an expectation and not communicate it. Realistic, like it doesn't make sense to have an expectation that is not actually achievable because it's only going to lead to your disappointment and the other person feeling like they're failing you, and it's just a mess. And conscience is really important because you'll be surprised how many expectations we actually hold on to or have that we're not aware of. When we were getting married, when we were planning our wedding, this is the first place I think I actually started to experience this. I didn't realize how many expectations I had for my wedding day.
Yeah, he had very strong opinions on flowers all of a sudden.
I didn't, and obviously it was coming from some other place, but regardless, I had to do some inner, I had to do some self-reflecting and kind of go, well, why am I feeling this way, and where is this coming from? And had to deal with a little bit of these are not healthy expectations because they're just, I'm not even, I'm not aware of these expectations that I have. I have to be aware of all my expectations. I can't just, once something didn't happen, go, hey, you didn't do that. Well, that doesn't that's not helpful and that's not kind. But if you focus on making sure all your expectations in your relationship are communicated, realistic, making sure that you're, conscious and aware of them and agreed upon, it's going to set you up for some serious success, especially if you have healthy communication skills as well.
Yeah. I wanted to touch on the conscious aspect as well, just very briefly, because I think this is why we tell you guys to spend a lot of time talking about your relationship history, your childhood, your parents, your families of origin, because a lot of that impacts those unconscious expectations. When we got married, I had a very clear expectation of we're gonna have dinner together every single night. We're gonna sit at the dinner table. It's gonna be this we're not gonna just sit on the couch and eat dinner. Whereas Ruben,
and there was no TV on, right, during that expectation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas Ruben had a very different expectation. It's we'll have dinner, we'll cook food, and whoever is home can eat whenever they're hungry.
No, I value dinner time together as a family, but not every single night. To me, that's crazy.
Yeah, but that was also because of how we were raised, how we grew up.
Yeah.
My family had dinner together every single night. My mom would work late, and we would wait.
Every single night?
Every single night. And it would always be around the dinner table and no TV, and it was very strict. We were always having dinner together.
Real quick, show of hands. How many of y'all grew up in families where you had dinner around a table every single night? Okay, how many of y'all grew up the total opposite of that? The opposite wins, I think, by numbers. But
anyone somewhere in between? Yeah, there's some in betweens.
Cool.
Okay. So those expectations were very unconscious, but because we also chatted about a lot of those things, Ruben came to my family's house. He saw that we would have dinner together around the table all the time, and we would not have the TV
At first,
on.
I thought it was just because I was there.
But then
I thought they were the king has arrived here. Let's eat around the table, But apparently, that's just normal.
But then I also got to see how your family was, and your family was very much around, they would lay out the food and people would go and grab and serve themselves whenever they were hungry and sit around the couches, and TV would be on, and they would kind of chit chat sometimes, and sometimes it would just be quiet. And it was very different from what I grew up with, but it helped us understand each other's expectations. So that's just a side note on conscious and unconscious expectations.
Yeah.
So you set your healthy boundaries and expectations, you communicate them, and the next thing is check in regularly. Check in. Be hey, how's it going? Are you feeling loved today? Are you feeling I'm able to meet this desire and this need of yours? Are you feeling, how do you feel? Or even asking your partner, how do you feel about the fact that you've been doing this regularly? Or do you feel like this is going well? Do you feel like you're able to do this, or it's too much on you?
Yeah, it's really good. Sometimes a situation gets really heated, and we actually were in another counseling session, and so we talked about this. But learning how to take a healthy time out for yourself, learning how to, in moments of like extreme like high emotions, recognizing that not the other person needs a timeout. You never say you need a timeout. You always say I need a timeout, like I need a break to be able to go, remove myself, gather my emotions, gather my thoughts together, breathe a little bit to be able to come back and actually deal with the situation with a little bit more, wisdom, with a little bit more of a collected mind. So learning, if you can, in those situations, to kind of just walk away, think through, and then come back to deal with it in a healthier manner, I think is super important, underrated, something that we should learn to do.
Yeah, but that was kind of like lowercase walk away. There's also like uppercase, like big letters walk away.
Yeah.
And like you may be in a situation that the relationship is quite toxic. Yeah. And so you need to recognize and identify that, and if necessary, walk away. And I say this with the caveat of like, if you can. Yeah. If you can walk away, because if you are in a marriage, we don't recommend you walk away. We recommend you try healthy avenues to work through it. Mm-hmm. But if you can walk away, and it's a situation where you're like, this is just, it's so bad, it's not getting better, there's no way around this, we've tried every single avenue to get better, and it cannot get better, then at that point, I would walk away. And we never recommend that you give up at the first sight of, trouble or difficulties. Yeah. Really, when we say this, it's like you've done a lot of things, and you're choosing to make that decision also with guidance and with like wise counseling and with God's like wisdom and him speaking into your relationship as well. Yeah.
So that's all we had for the topic of ultimatums. There's some snacks at the back. Say hello to other people, but send in your questions. My number will go up on the screen soon. And then we'll be back in 5 minutes, and we'll start answering some of your live questions in-house. So go do that stuff.